How are y'all this morning? I want to welcome you here this morning. And for those that's online watching, we want to thank you for joining in with us this morning. We just want you to just forget about the we. Let's just concentrate on God and just let Him bless us. I think we're going to have a good message this morning. One day this week, as I was traveling between the store, there's a news article came on the radio, and the lady made a comment, and she said, "Are you a thermostat or are you a thermometer?" You know, and it just kind of got the wheels turning in my mind a little bit, because I deal with thermometers and thermostats at work and different things. And, you know, you think about it. Are you a thermostat or are you a thermometer? If you're a thermometer, what does a thermometer do? It just registers the temperature, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, if it's right or if it's wrong. Thermostat controls it. So if you're a thermostat, you have an opportunity to control what's going on in your life. You can make a change. If something is not right, you have that opportunity. You can change it. You've got that thermostat. You've got that control. Whereas if you're a thermometer, you're just there. You're accepting it. Well, it's going to be this way. Well, I'm just going to accept it. And you accept it from there on. But you can change. If you're a thermostat, you can change that. So, you know, that made me start thinking, I want to be a thermostat. I don't want to just be a thermometer and just accept that I am how I am. I can use that thermostat, be a thermostat, and make a difference. So think about that. Are you a thermostat or are you a thermometer? So let the Lord bless you. We're going to get ready to take up the offering. And we just want to let the Lord have His way today. And then after this, we'll go into our worship. Brother Gary, would you?
Good morning, everybody. Amen. Well, I got here at 7 o'clock this morning, and I turned the thermostats on, bro. Let's all stand. Hallelujah. Good to be here this morning. Just be thanking our brother John and Sherry there in Michigan. Just pray for them that, Lord, just they are in Michigan right now, right? And Brother Brian and Andy just had a new addition, so be remembering them. Amen. Let's love the Lord this morning.
All my days I've been held in your hand.
be seated. Good to be here this morning. This past weekend, I got to be at a minister at a funeral for my aunt. Mother's sister passed away last week, Melissa's mom. And didn't know, I just knew the three sisters and some of their daughters. And we got to go. It's up in Chicago is where it was, and so it's a foreign land to me. That big of a city anyway. But the Lord watched over me, Sherry, and Patricia that went. And we got there the evening before the next day when the funeral was, so we went to my cousin's house, Melissa's sister, Cindy. And when we got there and we walked in, they were dozens of young people from this high, to my size, but teenagers. And come to find out nearly every one of them was kinfolk, cousins and cousins, and I thought that was pretty neat when we walked in the door. We didn't know what we were expecting because we hadn't seen a lot of them. Some of them we never have seen. And it was pretty neat. And as they asked me when I was up there, would I speak and say something at the funeral for June and bring up some stuff if I could remember things. But she lived in Chicago all the time, so there wasn't a whole lot I could remember to bring up. But what I thought, the Lord impressed me, and I spoke it to them, because during the funeral, it wasn't a real big funeral home, but there was I guess, 30, 40 people there. And what impressed me was, and I thought, something to encourage the family, because a lot of them I don't think knew Jesus, but and hopefully I introduced them to Jesus during the sermon. But what really impressed me was the kids, her children, her grandchildren, what she left on this world. And I thought to myself, what can we do in this earth? We can witness, we can minister, we can tell people about Jesus. But one of the greatest things that you moms, you dads out there that you've given to the world to present Jesus is your family. The legacy that you're leaving, because we're all going to one day. And my mother was 83, 84, I think, when she passed. And Miss June, or her sister, twin sister at that, passed away at 85. And I know Mother has a ton of grandkids and great-grandkids. And it might be a few great ones, I don't know. But same way with June, I thought, because I never really knew June. I knew June all my life, but I didn't realize the kids and the grandkids and the great-grandkids. And I thought that was so neat when I walked into that house and seen all her grandchildren and all her great-grandchildren. And so I knew she left something in this world, and that's a family. And I appreciate my family that I have, and I was asked to minister this morning, but I am, but just in a different way. And where is my brother at this morning? There he is. Come on. And this is my, everybody knows this fella right here. Just hadn't seen him maybe in a while. And he'll minister for us this morning. I don't want to build him up too big so he might want to fall. I don't want you to fall. So.
That working? There we go. That's weird hearing you call me brother. Just to say that up front. To start out a little bit, kind of telling you guys what I've been doing here lately, since I don't get to come here this often. I work at a church. I'm a pastor. I'm a what we call next gen creative pastor, which is a fancy term for I help make like the videos and things, all that for youth and kids, and I get to participate in. Go to kids camps and youth camps and a bunch of fun things like that. Actually, that's one of my favorite things about, I do Facebook, but I don't do it a whole lot. But I love to see on there like memories, like, cause that's my favorite part of Facebook is brings up the past things. It shows you pictures like, hey, 10 years ago today you were here, and I'm like, and that's one of my favorite times about this type of year is I always see these like 10 years ago today picture, and it's like me at camp with, like exhausted with a bunch of kids, and then periodically throughout the whole thing I'll see all these like pictures of that. And here recently, over the past couple of years, I also started working for this company called Shore Shooters, and they do they just do portrait sessions on the beach, and they hire different photographers to go out and do sessions, and they pay you for it and stuff like that. So I knew I was good at taking photos, and so I applied. I got the job, and an unintended consequence of it is what I realized was one of the things I got to see. Over the course of these past 2 years, I've done, probably 100 to 200, about 150 to 200 portraits on the beach, ranging from every walk of life you could imagine. And that was one of the coolest things. It's always one of the cool things that I get to do as a photographer and as my job at the church is I look at life a lot through a lens. Through the lens of a camera, through the lens of a video recorder, whatever device, and capture moments. I like to think of it as like I get to steal these moments and capture them that nobody else will see again. They're held there. And that's how I kind of look at it. But I got to, the fun thing is you get to look through this lens and see these groups of people. Sometimes you catch them and they're smiling. Sometimes you catch them and they're not smiling. Sometimes you catch all these different emotions that range through as you look, and you look back at the pictures you captured. And over the course of doing all these portraits and all this video work and all this kind of stuff, I came to this starting realization one day of just how much alike we all are. Like how much. A lot of times we keep ourselves separated by so many different things. We think we identify with one group or this group or that group, all this. But they're in the core, the thing that God created, the part of us, like these fascinating creations that God made. Like if you'd ever just stop and think about yourself for a little bit, the ability to like, you cut yourself and your body repairs itself. You go through all these, you have these, somehow we don't really even, science doesn't even fully understand how we have memory, how memory is stored in cells, and how we have memories, all these things that work, these synapses that have to fire off, that go off in our brain. We think, we've located, we've postulated where that may happen, how it may happen, but nobody really knows. We've put it into like we know that certain parts of our brain are what causes emotion and different things like that, but we don't know how all that happens. And as I sit there and think and look through people, it's fascinating to me just how like amazing the creation that God made in each one of us is. Because we all have, and even with these like I said, like with the cuts, we all have all of these, what I even look at is what I call them, like we have beautiful scars that were made from painful situations. These scars, and I like here recently, my daughter just had a big crash on our little thing called a one wheel, and one of the things is she kind of goofed her knee up. You can see it, but the doctor told her like she was basically the coolest little girl that he knew, because she came in with skateboard injury where everybody else, like he's like, I wish all kids would come in like this. And I was like, well, okay, maybe not that, but he told her about, you're the coolest like girl I know. You came in with this injury, and Libby's like, yeah, I'm gonna, like, it may scar, but I'm gonna have, at least I'll have a story to tell. And that's what I thought through. Like a lot of these scars and a lot of these things we all have them. I mean, there's stories that go across with them. And that's something that we all share. And whether it's physical, mental, whatever, we all have these things that we're made to have to share. So as I was sitting there thinking, when my dad asked me to speak today, I was kind of thinking about like how do I formulate a message? I never really thought about that. Sometimes I like to sit back and think like, how do you think through building a message? And I guess I'm a visual learner. I like to see things, and oftentimes I'll create these things in my head so I can help understand what it is I'm trying to learn. So I often think of like building, like when you want to speak to somebody or you're delivering a message, I often think of it as like baking a cake. Like I know that there are ingredients to making a cake, and I know there are good ingredients, there are bad ingredients. You can use too much of an ingredient, so on and so forth. But sometimes it's really good to have a set of directions that you can follow when you lay it out. And so I was sitting there kind of doing that, and I kind of laid out this little bit of on how to do a message or this message by kind of doing this, taking care of business. So I started off like this. I pulled together the following ingredients. So I got 2 cups of the Bible. All right. So we're going to talk about the Bible or a passage from the Bible. I got 1 cup of a personal story. All right. I'm going to throw that in there. I got a couple of tablespoons of different spices, and we'll talk about those in a minute. You got a dash of like some Greek and Hebrew. That way I can look smart and educated, so I can throw out some Greek words and tell you what it means. So you say, oh, wow, he's really smart. And then I've got like a smidge of like a quote, just a little bit of a quote I'm throwing there to help. But to know that, like, the basic thing you need to start out with, anytime you look at an ingredients, you're looking at like the ingredients for a recipe or something. Generally, it works to look up the title. Because if you're going to make a chocolate cake, you don't want to follow cheesecake recipe, right? So you look at the title of what you're about to drink. So I call this kind of like what I consider a thing that we kind of stop and we think. I don't know how to like put this in terms of somewhere in there. I don't know where it happens. Most of it probably happens after high school or college or wherever they think. We stop looking at life and the journey and the things that we do as learning. We think of learning as what I did in high school, what I did in college, and after I get out of college or after I get out of high school, I've learned all I need. And now I just go and you stop trying to actually push forward in learning. We kind of let things happen, and we do learn from that experience, but we don't intentionally engage in like, how can I improve? How can I gain in knowledge and learning? And with that, so that's what I call this is lifelong learning. And there's actually a book out there. It's one of my favorite books. And the guy was talking about what discipleship and what life is like. And he said he basically calls it the long obedience in the same direction. All right, that's what your walk is in the Christian life, is the long obedience, a long walk, long obedience in the same direction. So obedient to God, moving in the same direction. That's how you should live your life, this walk in obedience to God. And as I was sitting there formulating out this thing, different stuff, what I realized is this. I didn't know my dad was going to ask me to speak. A lot of times that happens. Sometimes I know beforehand, and I'm giving him, weeks notice and things like that, or more than a couple of weeks notice, even months notice. Sometimes it just happens. But what I realized is this, that when I sat down and I think like, I start asking questions to God, like, hey, what is it what I need to speak on? I often realize that he's preparing me by the things I'm going through beforehand, these little things that I'm learning here and there, and he's putting it together, and he says, and by the time I get there and where it's kind of like, you need to talk on this, I realize he's already set me up and given me a lot of these ingredients to talk about, and they're already there, so I don't have to go. Sometimes you have to dig, sometimes just search, but it already have the foundational work, so it was kind of there. And so over the past couple of months, some different speakers from camp and from different things, we've all been like talking about the story of Lazarus, and they're talking about it in different ways and different things. And each speaker and each person that talked about it kind of gave me some kind of new revelation on the story, which is still another thing that's crazy to me, that you can read these stories over and over and over and over for, I don't know, however many years. I'm 43. I don't know how long I've heard the story Lazarus, but how many times I can still learn a new aspect of something out of that story. And it still blows my mind that, wow, how have I never saw that? Every time it's one of these new things pop up. So what we're going to do, I'm going to start out. I'm just going to read part of, we're going to John chapter 11. We're going to stop somewhere in there along the way, but and then we'll break it down a little bit more, but I wanted to read it. I like sometimes just reading it out first. So we'll start there, John chapter, and this is the death of Lazarus. And this is out of Message version. So a man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary, and her a man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. This was the same Mary who had massaged the Lord's feet with aromatic oils and then wiped her with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sister sent word to Jesus, Master, the one you love so very much is sick. When Jesus got the message, he said, this sickness is not fatal. It will become an occasion to show God's glory by glorifying God's Son. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, but oddly, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed on where he was for 2 more days. After the 2 days, he said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." They said, "Rabbi, you can't do that. The Jews are out to kill you. You're going back." Jesus replied, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in daylight doesn't stumble because there's plenty of light from the sun. Walking at night, he may very well stumble because he can't see where he's going." He said these things, and then he announced, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I'm going to wake him up." The disciples said, "Master, if he's going to sleep, he'll get a good rest and wake up feeling fine." Jesus was talking about death, while his disciples thought he was talking about a nap. And then Jesus became explicit. "Lazarus died, and I'm glad for your sakes that I wasn't there. You're about to be given new grounds for believing. Now let's go to him." That's when Thomas, the one called the twin, said to his companions, "Come along, we might as well go die with him." When Jesus finally got there, he found out Lazarus already dead for 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, only a couple of miles away, and many of the Jews were visiting Martha and Mary, sympathizing with them over their brother. Martha heard Jesus was coming and went out to meet him, and Mary remained in the house. Martha said, "Master, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Even now, I know that whatever you ask God, he will give you." Jesus said, "Your brother will be raised up." Martha replied, "I know that he will be raised up in the resurrection at the end of time. You don't have to wait for the end. I am right now, resurrection and life. The one who believes in me, even when he or she dies, will live. And everyone who lives believing in me does not ultimately die at all. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Master. All along I have believed that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who comes into the world." After saying this, she went to her sister Mary and whispered in her ear, "The teacher is here, and he is asking for you." The moment she heard that, she jumped up and she ran out to him. Jesus had not yet entered the town, but was still in the place where Martha met him. When her sympathizing Jewish friends saw Mary run off, they followed her, thinking she was on her way to the tomb to weep. There Mary came to where Jesus was waiting and fell at his feet, saying, "Master, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her sobbing and the Jews with her sobbing, a deep anger welled up within him, and he said, "Where did you put him?" "Master, come and see," they said. Now Jesus wept. The Jews said, "Look how deeply he loved him." Others among them said, "Well, if he loved him so much, why didn't he do something to keep him from dying? After all, he opened the eyes of a blind man." Then Jesus, the anger again welling up with him, arrived at the tomb. It was a simple cave in the hillside with a slab of stone laid against it. Jesus said, "Remove the stone." The sister of the dead man, Martha, said, "Master, by this time there's a stench. He's been dead for 4 days." Jesus looked her in the eye. "Did I tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" Then to the others, "Go ahead, take away the stone." They removed the stone. Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and prayed, "Father, I'm grateful that you have listened to me. I know you always listen. I know that you always do listen, but on account of this crowd standing here, I've spoken so that they might believe that you sent me." Then he shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And he came out, a cadaver wrapped from head to toe with a kerchief over his face. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him loose." We'll stop right there. This story has a bunch of there's a bunch of things going on in this story, there's so many ways of taking this and focusing on different groups out of this whole thing, and we're going to kind of look at each one. But before we do that, I'm going to get back to this, back to our ingredients list. So we have the 2 cups of the Bible we just put here. So we're going to talk about now. Add 1 cup of a personal story. It's not, when I say it's not a tough for me, but sometimes it often is a tough story to tell when you tell a personal story. Especially, I don't know how many of you guys journal. I would suggest everybody journal, because you'll find fascinating, if you go back and look at journals from past, you'll find fascinating ways about you, how much you've grown, basically. And I was looking at my journal, and I just happened upon this one thing, and I felt like I'm just going to share it, because sometimes you never see these sides of people. You never see those little points, because we always put out this, what we project kind of what we want everybody to see. So we kind of put this out there, and you don't ever know the hidden part side of a person. But oftentimes when you read someone's journal, that's why part of me is like really glad to have these journals that I can pass on to my kids when I pass away. But part of me is like, I'm not giving it to them until I'm dead because I don't want them to know all all these thoughts about me. But at the same time, I do want them to know that we are real people, and I don't want to hide the fact that I had doubts and anger and all these different things. But I'm going to read this little entry. It's just a random entry out of one of my. It was actually from last year. And I'm just going to read this, and I'll talk. We'll talk a little bit from there. It says, "I woke today sad. I woke today sad and annoyed. I woke today sad, annoyed, and easily angered. I woke today not liking myself. I felt like a failure. I felt or feel like I'm broken pieces that I frantically am trying to pull back together. Every time I feel I have a piece in place and focus on something else, that piece seems to go out of whack. How can we have all the knowledge and wisdom on how to live this life, but time and time again we fail to use it? How can we walk with Christ? How can our walk with Christ not be a formula, but have characteristics of a formula? In math, things like a squared plus b squared equals c, they have a certain stated law. A squared plus b squared will always equal c. There is no other answer. It will never be d. It just can't. 1 plus 2 will always equal 3. It will never equal 4. I know relationships are not mathematical equations. Math is cold. It's unrelenting and harsh. It cares little, if at all, for how you feel, and sometimes I actually like that. Sometimes, if I'm very honest, that's exactly how I want my relationship with God to be, because I'm pretty freaking good at math. I want the predictable outcome, but a relationship will never be like math, so I will remain anxiously hoping I made the right move. It's pretty tough sharing you like that side of like these deep things, these thoughts, these feelings that I have, like waking up, just not liking it already the day. And as I sat there and I was reading this, in terms of this message, which is our recipe for what we're making here of a lifelong learner, I got to thinking about that. Like, how does something like this, how can I learn from these things that are getting so it can help me grow and move me forward so I can bake the cake, as I say. And from that, we add some more of our ingredients here. First of all, this is the Greek term. It's called, I'm going to fail this badly, olakala. Olakala is a Greek word where we derive the word okay. All right, the word okay. Olakala means all is well. All right, all is well. And so, because how many times do you, like when you're worried about a friend or somebody's coming to you worried about you and they say, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? They ask those terms. And we want to say yes, all is well. That's when oftentimes we say that back, not fully knowing good and well, not everything's okay, but we say that back. And so from that, we get our spices. And some of these are, when I was first looking at them, I was like, they seem very much alike because we use them interchangeably. All right, I'm going to talk about, you hear the word fear and anxiousness, all right? Fear and anxiousness. Oftentimes, they often seem like they're the same thing, but they're actually not. There's a fear is actually an emotion. It's an emotion that you have. It's a natural response that you have to a certain thing, and fear has something to do. Basically, your emotions, your senses that you have. Fear is a natural response. It's actually an emotion you can't really control. You can control your emotions after you have them, but you can't control when an emotion arises. So, like, fear often comes when it's a state, your body, it actually gets your body prepared for something without conscious thought, all right? So you have that, you hear footsteps in the dark, everybody's heartbeat starts racing. You hear a horn honk at you on the road, your heartbeat starts racing a little bit, all right? That's an unintended response of something happening. Your body is prepping you for either to fight or to run away. All right? That is a natural response. Fear happens. Now, anxiousness, we're going to look at, is another thing, has the exact same symptoms. Heart rate increases, you feel palms sweaty, all these kind of things. But it's an exact same, it's different. Let me read you what basically that is. Sorry, I'm on like 4 different things here. anxiousness is basically what we call, it's an inhibitory emotion, all right? So anxious is a thing it comes up to start against fear, all right? So it's an emotion that results, it's from avoiding core emotions and needs. So anxious happens when you don't address your emotion. Whatever emotion it is, when you don't address where is this coming from, why am I having this, and you don't address it, can become anxious. All right, from there it says anxiety results from the physical efforts to push down emotions. So if you know that you are not in a situation that has a physical danger in that moment, but you are experiencing something akin to fear, you can assume you're experiencing anxiety. All right, so I feel like a lot of us find us there. It's not something that you're afraid of. You don't want to address whatever the fear is. And so as a result, you stay in this, you have the same symptoms of fear, but there is no physical danger. We just stay in this state of emotion, but that's where the what ifs could happen, and you just stay in this flow to this thing of anxiety. All right? And then the next two, we're going to go through this I have two really fascinating articles. If you want to know more about like fear and anxiety and these next two, I have two I can give you, and you can read all in detail. I just don't have time to like really dig into those. The next two are basically happiness and contentment. So we think of those two almost in our normal conversations. Those can interplay between each other. Happiness and contentment. We can take one and use it. We use them interchangeably. Actually, they both mean two different things. I'm going to read this is basically a definition of happiness is this. Happiness is a state of being satisfied, experiencing pleasure and enjoyment, and or absence of pain. And contentment is a state of satisfaction that transcends the allure of basic needs and desires. So basically it's like this. We do something to become happy. Like we work at something to become happy, right? That's happy. That's working towards happiness. Contentment is you're doing something out of a place of peace. Happiness may be a result, all those things, but you're doing something out of a state of a place where it's not like you're not trying to become happy or satisfied. You're actually doing this out of a sense of a place where you're already at peace. I'll give you an example even better, like the difference between the two. So think of it like this. Think of happiness as being similar to a desire for food. We have a very powerful compulsion to eat since we need food to eat, food to live. However, we often want to continue eating when we are full. Oftentimes, we do this because we crave the pleasure of eating. This is understandable since eating is both necessary for life and its activity that triggers more neural activity than nearly anything else than we can busy ourselves with. In modern age of inconvenience foods, it's quite common to fill up on foods that have little to no real nutrition. This leaves us feeling unsatisfied and drives us to continue eating, even if we know we should stop. To understand contentment, we have to consider the effect of learning to eat nutritious food and avoid empty calories. When we do this, we can satiate, right? Whatever, satiate our hunger. And over time, we can train our bodies and brains to crave real nutrition instead of empty calories. The pursuit of happiness versus the development of contentment is very much akin. We may seek happiness in distractions that are entertaining, relationships that are unhealthy, or by consuming excess food. Or we can develop, curate, and nurture contentment with healthy pursuits, meaningful sports, and seeking healthy and loving relationships. So in those two things, oftentimes we have this pursuit of happiness that we're going after, but what we should be, and those things are happiness. It's kind of a happy feeling taking a bite of a Big Mac, that first bite of the Big Mac, and you're eating the fries. At the end, part of me still wants another Big Mac because it's probably not nutritious enough to actually sustain what I need, and so I want another Big Mac so I can continue the happiness. Or I can learn to develop contentment where I'm saying, like, well, that may bring happiness for that moment. I'm going to hate it later on, but it's going to bring happiness now. But what if, I start eating better to stay and feel healthier? All right, that's the difference between the two. Okay, so basically in this, we'll go back to these, back to our recipe again. You also have a quote that I'm going to throw in there. Simple quote. You think it's the easiest thing in the world. John Maxwell, probably one of the biggest, like, teachers on leadership, teaching people how to lead other people that there is. And he said the hardest person to lead is yourself. All right, the hardest person to lead will always be yourself. It's really easy to tell everybody else how they should do something. And then to take that and then apply that to your life becomes really difficult. And here's why. Because we are very much attuned by what we see and what we hear and all those things. We can very much see where everybody else is making mistakes because we physically see it. We see that right there. None of us walk around with, like, just a mirror to make sure, like, because how many people would, like, sometimes me and Mary Liz would get into an argument and she'll say something some way and I'm like, she goes, yeah, I said that. And I was like, yeah, but you said it like this, you had this look, and I knew it was something totally different, what you're trying to say to me. She's like, no, this is what I meant. I was like, no, you had a tone. You had a tone when you said that to me, and I'm reading that totally different. You didn't mean it like that. So, because it's easy for me to identify that in her because I see it and I feel it, and that's what I'm interpreting. We can't do that to ourselves. We don't just say our own self in the mirror, how the tones or the things we make. We don't do that, and that's the reason why it's really, really hard to lead ourselves, because we have to stop and take time to sit back and reflect on our actions. We're not seeing them in the moment so that we can address them. We have to take and stop and think back, like, why am I doing this the way I'm doing it? And often that's the reason why it's so hard for us to lead, because it takes time and it takes these things where we don't want to go. I don't really want to go back and address why I did that. Yeah, because part of us knows it's a mistake, part of us, don't. But as we move on with that, we're going to go on to the back to the story, and I want to look at some of these through these eyes of this recipe. Sorry. First of all, in this story, you got Jesus, and he's off at this place. This place is about, in physical distance, it's a walking distance because they didn't have cars. It's about a day's walk, what you would consider a day's walk. Where they were staying at is a day's walk. And Lazarus is sick. His sisters, Mary and Martha, send somebody to go tell Jesus that Lazarus is sick. Basically, by the time that messenger got, he was a day's walk away. By the time he got to Jesus, he was actually already dead. All right? He was actually already dead. And then so Jesus gets there. The guy comes and says, Master, the one you love is very sick. Jesus got the message, and he said the sickness is not fatal, even though Lazarus was actually already dead. It will become an occasion to glorify God. So Jesus in this story is the person who is the one walking in contentment. He's the one operating out of peace. He's the one operating out of, like, he knew what was going to happen because he was already talking with God. He was already talking with his Father. And everything he does out of this is an example to teach every person in this story, from his disciples to everything else. He's already operating out of contentment. These other guys, they start operating out of those other things, out of anxiousness, fear, and even happiness. And, like, it goes on, his disciples... It says, I love how it says, and Jesus, and when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed on where he was for 2 more days. Like, yeah, I'm just going to hang out here for 2 more days. After the 2 days, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. They said, Rabbi, you can't do that. The Jews are out to kill you. Operating out of fear right there. Their first response was, we're going to go back to this place. This place is where they're after to kill you. Everybody knew it. They were out to hunt, and they were like, hey, operating out of fear. Immediately, that was the first thing. Heart rate, you can just imagine, it's just like us. Heart rate starts beating a little bit. Palms get a little sweaty. You're following this guy. He's your leader. Let's go back to where it's dangerous. Fear takes place. And Jesus replied, and he goes on, he says there are 12 days, all this kind of stuff. And then he said these things, then announced, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I'm going to wake him up. Some of these feel so like Jesus was a little bit of a comedian, like he just says some of these stuff out like that. Yeah, he's asleep. I'm going to wake him up. Like, did they really think he was asleep? Like, yeah, I'm going to walk a whole day to go wake him up. Like, that's not really what he, but the disciples was like, everything he said, like, they couldn't find any, like, symbolism or anything. It was just like, it was like stone. It was like, wait, if he sleep, he needs some sleep. He needs rest. That's what they said back to him. Like, it'd do good. That'd be good for him. Let him sleep. And you can see Jesus kind of rolling his eyes a little bit, like, you idiots, kind of a deal. And he's like, no, he's dead. I'm going to go raise him. And it, kind of a deal. And so you have these disciples that are still operating in this fear, this fearful moment, not wanting to go back, and they're trying to talk him out. No, if he's asleep, he needs his rest. Let's let him stay. We ain't got to go if he's asleep. And so they're operating out of this sense of, this anxiousness and fear. And then from there, Jesus tells them that, no, he's dead. We're going to wake him up. And then I think Thomas gets such a bad rap in the Bible. We monitored him, doubting Thomas, right? We have monitored, but Thomas is every one of us. Thomas is just the guy that states out loud what we all think in our heads. That's exactly what happens. Thomas is the guy that just bluntly states what every one of us is feeling. And so we're like, in our terms, we're like, oh, doubting Thomas, don't be a doubter. We're all that way. We're that way. He's just dumb enough to say it out loud. All right, and he says, and I love, but his things are like so funny. They're like so funny to me, like the way he just like words it. Come on, we might as well go die with him. He's like giving up. He's really, okay, I'm afraid, but hey, I'm in it to win. I'm in it to the end. Let's go die with him. That was just like his response. Just put it that way. He's committed. He was committed. He was going to follow through. Like, he wasn't happy about it, but he was going to follow through. And then you go on from there. He says, when Jesus finally got there, Lazarus been dead for 4 days. He's been dead now 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, only a couple miles away, and that's where basically Martha ran out to meet him. She found out he was on his way. And Martha also is that person that kind of gets a bad rap, because we're always like that, like, oh, quit being a busybody, get out here. You need to be, like, at Jesus' feet, and we kind of, like, I know I used to give her a bad rap all the time because I thought I was like the Mary, always like, I just want to be there and worship and all this kind of stuff, and let somebody else make sure everybody else is getting fed and cleaning up around the place and all this. I'd rather just be here, She often gets a bad rap. But she thinks her little problem was a little bit through happiness. It was a temperamental thing. It was a short-term deal. She was like, if you would have been here, he wouldn't have died. And it's the same with Mary. Mary says the same thing, but Martha follows it up with, but what? But I know you're the son of whatever you said, will happen. But she makes that statement, but she doesn't make it thinking, what I say, with the perspective of a big enough perspective. She's making this perspective that, yes, I believe that you're the Son of God. And he says, yes, and then do you believe that Lazarus will be made alive again? She says, yes, when the rapture happens. See, her perspective on him, of who he was and the way she saw him, she hadn't allowed those things to get bigger. Oftentimes, we have to take something and back away and look at things. We have to see them from a perspective that's even bigger because we have this limited thing, and we stop like, man, he just did this, and other, all this kind of stuff, but we're limiting here on these certain things. And he's doing all these things, and he waited that time to teach every one of them, every person that he's encountering through these messages, something about himself. And that's what all the things that you go through, every temptation, every problems you face, all the things along the way are ways of making him bigger if you allow them to look through that lens. If you start looking through, like, the problems that you're facing, the difficulties, and they could be your own making, but that's life. That's how we do that all the time. But God doesn't say, okay, you made that problem, you got to get out of it. He doesn't do like that. He's like, let me show you. I'm going to help you. And he grows you out of it. Doesn't mean we don't have consequences, all those kind of things. But he does want to grow us and move us past something to something bigger and something better where we see him in a different way. Then you go on, and this is the one where I really want to stop on it for a second, but I actually don't know how to explain it. I'm still processing my own thoughts because I literally just had this thought as I was preparing. And maybe some of you guys will have insight, and you can think it's something to think on. Because Mary's response, because Mary comes running up to him. It says Martha. They both heard that Jesus was on the way. Martha ran out to meet him. All right? And then Martha goes back to Mary and says, hey, the Messiah, Jesus, he wants to talk to you. And it says after, basically, the teacher's here and he's asking for you. The moment she heard that, she jumped up and ran out to him. Talking about a little dramatic, like, I'm going to wait out here till somebody asks for me. That's what that throws up in my head right there. Like, I'm going to wait till somebody asks for me to come out, and then I'm going to come. I know she's grieving. I know those things. But still, Martha went out and Mary to stay. But once she found out that Jesus was actually, I'm jumping up and running out then. All right, she runs out there to meet him. And it says Jesus is not entered town yet, so the place where Martha and Mary met. When her sympathizing Jewish friends saw Mary run off, they followed her, thinking she was on her way to the tomb to weep there. This is a hard one. I don't know how to say this. Oftentimes, it's really easy for us to jump along with the people that are in the emotional wrecks and run along, acting like, and to be there for them, but also so hard. I don't know the right word to say. Sometimes we just tag along, like, because what is it? Misery loves company kind of deal. Like we all like, because it's such an easy emotion to express. It's crying and being in pain, and like we all like to be around it. And like this whole group went with her because she thought they thought she was, this like distraught, and she probably was. But she goes up and she says, Master, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her sobbing and the Jews with her sobbing, a deep anger welled within him. That kind of throws me there. It throws me there because I'm trying to think through, like, in the process, I try to think through, like, only thing I can think of that would cause maybe anger, other than the unbelief and all this, was, it says she fell at his feet weeping. And how was she introduced at the very beginning of the story? How was Lazarus introduced at the very beginning? It was a sister. He was the brother of Mary who washed Jesus' feet with her tears. And then here she is falling at his feet in tears, with tears, sobbing at his feet again, but in two completely different set of circumstances. In one of them, she completely believed and, like, he had restored things, and she went, and the other one was in, like, almost like if you had been, like, almost an accusation of fear at his feet. I'm not saying that that's the reason why Jesus got mad. That's what I'm saying. Like, part of that, as I was looking at the two of those things, I was thinking through the two different, like, ways that Mary is shown here. And it makes, and I try to think through. And then he looks on and he sees everybody else crying, and he gets mad again. And then you said, look how deeply he loved them. Others among them said, well, if he had loved them so much, he didn't. Why didn't he do something before he died? After all, he opened the eyes of the blind. Then Jesus, the anger welling up within him again, arrived at the tomb. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's oftentimes when you have people that are going through things, and you have these groups of people that are justifying their thoughts and their problems and the way their mindsets of things that are maybe not healthy. And we do that often. We justify people like, oh, you have a right to be angry at this, or you have a right to go up. Like, and we justify things, and we create these things that doesn't help that person move past or get healthy. I think that's one of the things, especially if you're a mature Christian. I think that's one of the ways and one of the things the enemy uses us is to help other people like almost feel like they're the way their things and the thoughts and their process that aren't healthy, and we justify them. I don't think God likes that very much. I think it angers him a little bit. And then you go on, and we're going to end kind of following up with this thing that you go on. He stands there before Lazarus or the tomb, and you have him tell him to open up the tomb. You got Martha again, who's a little bit anxious because she didn't want the smell to come out. Martha's anxious. She's like, Jesus, hey, he's been dead 4 days. It's going to stink, And Jesus is like, you said you believe. All right, the rest of you guys, open that tomb. And then he comes out. Lazarus comes out. And here's the thing, one of the biggest things to catch. Because this is what all of us are called to do. What he says next, this is what every one of you called to do. This is the main thing that you're called to do as Christians, is this next part. So you see Lazarus. Lazarus comes walking out, and he's wrapped from head to toe in burial clothes. All right? He comes out, death to life. All right? Very symbolic of us in the Christian walk, death to life. We accept Jesus, we go from a place of death to life. He called Lazarus forth. Lazarus comes walking out, wrapped head to toe in his burial clothes. And then Jesus looks over, hey, some of you guys help unwrap him. He still had dead clothes on. He still had burial clothes on. He still was dressed in what he was buried. What we want is death to life, them come back already in a suit and tie, already washed and ready to go. But they're not. They were dead, and they just been brought to life, but they're still wrapped in burial clothes. And our job is to go help unwrap them of their burial clothes, the parts that they're dead, the places where they're not. This, I mean, symbolically, don't any of you come down to a funeral and start stripping a person that's in a casket. I'm not asking anything like that. This is symbolic of you going to someone and helping them unwrap the burial clothes, the things that they were born, the death, the representation of their death. Because he couldn't do it. Like if you've ever seen one back in the day, how they're wrapped, they can't get out of they're wrapped head to toe they tighten all those pieces of cloth all the way around them. And so he needs someone to help take that off of him. And that's what that's what our walk in the Christian life is called to do. You're called to go up to somebody and to help them remove the burial clothes. Help them to get to where they're walking in life, because we all have that. We all walked and we all know. And some of us, to be honest, nobody really helped us very well, and we got really nice clothes over top of burial clothes. We got things still bound up all in there, and some of them we've been doing it for a long time, and those clothes are stanky, you know. They're there, and we come walking out, and we look really nice, but right underneath is those wraps that have been there for so long, and because, first of all, we don't really know how to take them off, and nobody's really helped show us. But that's part of discipleship. That's part of that process. And how this happens is simply this. And this is what we leave out so many times in so many ways, in so many everyday situations. It's just a simple talking with God, like, God, how can I help someone? And you don't have to make it spiritual. You don't have to make it like this, but you don't have to talk in biblical terms to him. It's like, God, how can I help this person, this new creation, this person, how can I help them remove some of the burial clothes without judging them? Because as I said, so many times we only want to allow you to come into our doors and to hang out with us if you've already have all this and you look really nice and you've removed all that stuff, and we don't want to go, we don't want, our offended, your smell offends me, the kind of deal. That's how often sometimes we look or we come across is once you get cleaned up a little bit, then you come hang out with us. First, clean yourself up, go take a shower, do these things. And I don't know, the more and more I see that, the more and more I read these stories and these things, it's like, when are we going to learn? The thing in matter is that none of this that I'm telling you is a new revelation to you. None of this that I'm saying is a new revelation. Sometimes, and we repeat these things, and we have these things. When are we going to take, what has to happen to take knowledge that you've been given, knowledge that you've read in the Bible, knowledge that you've grown up knowing all your life? They say it over and over, buckle your seatbelt, seatbelts save lives. How many of us still sometimes don't buckle our seatbelt? Stop, all these kind of things over and over and over and over again, but we don't take the knowledge that we know and apply it to our life. And so how do you do that? How do you learn to lead yourself? How do you bake as this process? Basically, I've taken all these ingredients, I mix them together, I sift them up, I put them all together, mix them all together, and then I pour them into this 5'9" frame, and it says set to bake for 43 years. And then somebody stick a toothpick in me, pull it out. If it does, it's clean, then I'm ready to go. If it still has some gooey stuff, put me back in to bake for a little bit. That's basically this whole thing. I'm walking in saying, hey, I want to apply these things to my life, because that's how we fight our war. That's how you fight. That's how you do the things that you do, is by taking and applying these things to your life and living a life that makes people want to look at you, like listen to you. And then when it comes across, it doesn't come across as, somebody asked me about, like, how could Jesus look at somebody, and the things he says, like, and like not come across as judgment. Here's the thing, the biggest difference between you and Jesus is this. Well, first is God. And the first is that God is all-knowing. He sees everything, all right? But the thing about it matter is seeing everything means you see everybody's past. You see everybody's mistake. You've seen what was done to them as little kids. You've seen how those mistakes as little kids form their brains, that moved on forward, that form their actions as teenagers, that form their actions as adults. And you can see, like, even abuse, maybe they were abused. Like, I often think about that, like, and my mind just does this. Sometimes, like, Coney is like that, he used to be the number one wanted person in the world. He was that guy in Africa that was going around capturing kids and turning them into soldiers, child soldiers. I mean, you look at it and you can't, there's an anger that builds up towards him. But then you later on, like, if you take it and you start backing up, like, how would Jesus look at Coney that's doing this, all those people? How would he do this and still love Coney? That's what I often think about. And it's because maybe the fact of the matter is Jesus saw the story that when Coney was a little kid, things were done to him. And he was a gun put into his hand, and he was called to do things, and all these things, and these things just actions, and nobody taught him any different. All these things move on. I'm not saying we justify people's actions. I'm saying this. He sees everybody's story, and he can look at you, and he can love you, and it doesn't come across as judgment. You can come up to somebody and see what their actions, and you look at them, and you try to tell them their actions wrong. It's going to come across as condemnation because you don't know anything about them, and you hadn't taken any time to get to know them at all. So it's going to come across as condemnation every time if you've not spent any time with a person to look at them and to know their story and to all of a sudden understand and have compassion to look at somebody and to be able to change them, to help them. That's the biggest difference between us. So your biggest thing you do with this life is helping with bedclothes is you have to get in proximity to help with bedclothes. To help remove stuff, you have to get in proximity to the stank. And to be able to help them. And guys, I don't want any of this to come across like saying, hey, you're all doing a bad job, or we're all messing up. I'm saying what it does is we have knowledge. Knowledge comes into a situation, and it brings a light to something. And that light, something we can either choose to use it to light up an area and say, okay, I'm going to grow from this. Or we say, I see it, but I want my Big Mac instead. I'd rather have it's not fulfilling for in the long haul, and I'm going to want a Big Mac in another hour, and then another hour after that, But I'm choosing, we still make those choices. And that's on you, and that's on you and your walk with God. And to wrap it up, I basically did wrap it up, but I'm going to finish it one more time. In general, in life, and in like even baking a cake or all these things, we see, a lot of times we all see outcomes. We see cake at the end. You see training for a sports, and you see victory at the end of the season. A lot of times we see in big moments, we see in these big things, well, when I get here, I'm going to achieve these things. All this, we think in terms of the big, big deals. We think even on like a weekday basis, we think in terms of what are we going to do on Friday? It's a Monday, but we're thinking, what am I going to do this weekend? We think in those terms. We don't think, it's very hard for us to stop and think on a day-to-day basis of a walk. But that's actually the number one way of doing things or the number one way of change and movement and going forward is to go at it knowing it's day-to-day. And it's not anything, there's nothing hard about what I'm asking you to do. It's just a simple thing is this. God, what do you want me to do today? Give me somebody in my path that I can talk, that I encourage, and be proactive about it. Just that day. Find that day and celebrate that day's win. Find one person or one action, one thing that you can do to help move the needle forward. Because it moves. What it does is it moves the needle forward in your life and your walk with God and helping somebody else. It's a day in, day out process. So every day, walking that first day, and it's as simple as God. I literally need to know. Give me somebody to talk with. I went to a funeral this past summer. One of my really good friends, his father fought with cancer for years and years, and just one of the coolest guys I've ever met. His dad. But they were telling stories, and his son was going to tell me stories, and hearing some at the funeral, and they were talking about the guy never met a stranger. He would go up and have 15-minute long conversations with people as he's checking out gas station, asking them how things were going. People he didn't know, things like that, and those things. And I kept thinking in my head, that's how I want to live. I want to see people. I want to see people in their burial clothes or whatever else, and then not be afraid of it. Not be anxious because I don't have the right words to say. Because sometimes you're not going to have the right words to say. Sometimes it's just them knowing that you just come up and say, hey, how you doing? That's all it takes, because they at least said, hey, somebody saw me today. And so it's what, like I said, it's simple in this process of looking at things of this baking a cake and living life, but from happiness and contentment, all these standpoints of all these different things that we experience every day on a day-to-day basis. But I want to get to that place like Jesus, where it's this state of contentment where I'm walking around knowing and I'm seeing people, and then I'm helping move the needle forward, helping them remove bedclothes and not bedclothes. That's weird. Remove death clothes. All right, everybody, guys, bow your heads. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this group of people. I thank you for this group of creations that you've made, that you've given us all these amazing stories, and we have goods and bad stories. We have stories of triumph. We have stories of failures. We have stories that, tear jerkers, and some that make you laugh out loud. I thank you for the human experience that you put into this collective human experience that you put in this room of a life, years and years and years of following after you, and the wealth of knowledge that we have that we often don't think we have the ability to help someone else with our story. I pray for every one of them here to know that the experiences and the insights and the things that you put inside each and every one of them is there for a reason, and it's there for someone that they're going to come in contact with, and that you're walking this life with them. We're these creations that you've made, that you're making new, and in it we're partnering with you to make this world a better place. Help us to walk and partner with you to help rebuild, even if it's one brick at a time, one day at a time, rebuild a better world. Your kingdom come and your will be done on this earth like it is in heaven. It is a prayer you taught us to pray that could happen, that your kingdom could be here and now. And let us walk as if your kingdom is here now, every day of our lives. Give us that ability to see people the way that you see them. Thank you, Father. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.